When Keanu Reeves arrived at his new villa, the sight before him stirred an uneasy feeling deep inside. His wealthy neighbor, Graham Whitlock, was standing near his property, dragging his dog with an aggression that shocked him. The dog, a young brown ridgeback mix, cowered under the man's harsh grip, clearly terrified. Little did Graham know, Keanu was now his new neighbor. And unlike others, Keanu wasn't the type to ignore cruelty. The sleek black car slipped silently through the upscale streets of Silverwood, a prestigious neighborhood where homes stood tall and manicured lawns stretched endlessly. The vehicle's dark-tinted windows reflected the perfectly pruned greenery and towering gates as it moved forward. Inside, Keanu sat quietly, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the leather armrest, lost in thought as the morning air rolled through the slightly cracked window. The chill felt invigorating, carrying with it the promise of a fresh start. For years, Keanu had owned the villa, but it had always been a distant investment, a property he barely ever thought about. Now, however, it was time for it to become his home, a retreat he could finally enjoy. The car neared its destination, and the anticipation swelled within him. As the car rolled to a stop, Keanu's phone buzzed, disrupting his quiet reflection. He glanced at the screen, seeing a message from his assistant, Patrick. With a soft chuckle, he tapped the call button. "Good morning, Keanu." Patrick's familiar voice greeted him, warm and professional, a hint of their long-standing relationship in the tone. "I just wanted to make sure everything is set for your arrival at the villa. The staff has been cleaning it all week. It should be spotless now." Keanu smiled slightly, appreciating Patrick's thoroughness. "Thanks, Patrick. You know, I don't need it to feel like a hotel," Keanu replied, his voice low and gruff, the warmth of his smile barely audible. "I'm hoping it'll feel more like home." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Patrick's voice came back with a knowing chuckle. "Exactly what I meant. A comfortable place for you to relax. I know how important it is for you to have a space that's personal, not just another hotel room." "I appreciate that," Keanu said sincerely, his gaze drifting back to the approaching villa. He wondered how it would feel inside, how it would finally come to life as his personal sanctuary, even if just temporarily. Patrick continued, "If you need anything, let me know. I can be there anytime. It might make the transition smoother." Keanu shook his head, although Patrick couldn't see him. "I've got it covered, but thanks. I've got Malvin here and I'm sure he'll handle everything." Patrick's voice softened with affection. "You never change, Keanu. Always independent. But remember, I'm here if you need me." The call ended, and Keanu felt a sense of peace wash over him as the car continued to glide up the private driveway. The gates parted, granting them entry. Keanu couldn't suppress a smile. This was the moment he had been waiting for. As the car rolled to a gentle stop, Keanu stepped out, breathing in the fresh air. The villa before him was everything he had hoped for. Its Mediterranean-inspired architecture stood in stark contrast to the modern mansions of Beverly Hills. The terracotta roof tiles gleamed in the sunlight, and the white stucco walls radiated warmth. Ornate wrought iron balconies, draped with ivy, added a rustic charm, while large windows promised bright, welcoming interiors. A tall, well-groomed man in a crisp uniform appeared as Keanu stepped forward. He was Malvin, the butler who had been with the house for years. With a bow, he greeted Keanu, his voice cultured and respectful. "Welcome, Mr. Reeves. The staff and I are delighted to have you. The maids are ready to assist you with your luggage." Keanu smiled and nodded, appreciating Malvin's professionalism. "Thank you, Malvin," Keanu replied, then glanced around at the beautiful surroundings. "I think I'll take a walk around the neighborhood first while it's still cool. Could you have my bags brought up to my room in the meantime?" "Of course, sir," Malvin replied without hesitation, signaling to the waiting staff. As they moved to unload Keanu's luggage, Keanu took a deep breath and began his walk toward the gate. He had owned this property for years, yet it had always felt distant, almost like a business transaction. Now it was his home, and he hoped it would bring him the peace he had long been seeking. As he walked, lost in thought, the distant sound of a dog barking pulled him from his musings. His attention turned to a figure on the sidewalk. An older man, dressed in expensive loungewear and wearing wireless earbuds, was walking a young ridgeback mix. The dog, a beautiful animal, seemed nervous, its movements hesitant. The collar was too tight and the leash appeared too heavy for its frame. Keanu continued watching, his gaze narrowing as the dog attempted to relieve itself at the gate. Suddenly, the man's expression shifted from neutral to enraged. With a violent yank on the leash, he pulled the dog harshly, almost lifting it off the ground. "Bad dog," the man snarled. "Stupid animal." Keanu's blood ran cold. He watched in disbelief as the dog cowered, tail between its legs, trembling in fear. The man's rage was palpable, and the contrast between the peaceful surroundings and the cruelty being displayed struck Keanu deeply. Then, as if sensing Keanu's presence, the man turned. His expression shifted instantly to a forced smile, his demeanor changing as though nothing had happened. "Well, hello there," the man said, his voice suddenly warm. "You must be the new owner of the villa. I'm Graham Whitlock." Keanu hesitated before extending his hand. "Keanu Reeves," he replied, his voice polite but guarded. Graham's eyes lit up. "Of course. I've seen your films. Brilliant work, truly. I've lived in this neighborhood for years. It's a wonderful place, you'll see." Keanu's eyes flickered to the dog, which was now hiding behind Graham's legs, shaking in fear. Despite Graham's attempt at charm, Keanu couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. The dog's terror was far more than just nervousness. It was the terror of an animal that had been mistreated. As Graham rambled on about his accomplishments, his best-selling books, his retreats, and his status as a local celebrity, Keanu's attention kept drifting back to Rusty, the ridgeback. Graham continued to paint himself as a beacon of mindfulness and compassion, but every word seemed increasingly hollow. The dog's fearful posture was a stark contradiction to Graham's carefully constructed image. Keanu's concern for the animal grew as he noticed more signs of abuse. Rusty was underweight, with patches of fur missing. It was clear this wasn't just a problematic breed, as Graham had suggested. This was an animal suffering. Keanu finally broke his silence, his voice calm but firm. "Is everything all right with your dog?" he asked. "He looks unwell. I know a vet if you need one." Graham's smile faltered for a brief moment, and Keanu caught a flicker of anger in his eyes before the charm returned. "Oh, Rusty is just fine," Graham said, his tone smooth but tight. "We're working on him. He's still adjusting." Keanu wasn't convinced, but before he could press further, Graham quickly shifted the conversation. "We're hosting the neighborhood's 75th anniversary celebration at my place soon. You should come," he said, his tone enthusiastic. "It'll be a great time." Keanu, still unsettled by the earlier encounter, nodded politely. "I appreciate the invite. I have a meeting this afternoon, but I'll try to stop by." As Graham led Rusty away, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The contrast between Graham's self-professed teachings of compassion and the reality of his treatment toward his dog was too stark to ignore. Keanu turned back toward the villa, his mind racing. As he entered, the cool interior provided a welcome contrast to the discomfort he felt outside. He took a deep breath, already contemplating the months ahead. What secrets might lurk behind the shiny surfaces of this seemingly perfect neighborhood? Keanu had some time before his scheduled meeting, and he decided to use it to relax and settle into his new surroundings. Settling onto the couch, he pulled out his phone to check his emails. The house was quiet, broken only by the soft hum of the ceiling fans and the occasional distant bird call from the garden. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, thinking that maybe staying here for the next 3 months wouldn't be so bad after all. He had never lived in this house before, always renting it out, and now he had the chance to truly enjoy it. Just as he began to lose himself in his correspondence, a sound cut through his focus. A high-pitched whimper followed by a pain-filled howl. The noise carried clearly despite the distance between properties, suggesting serious distress. Keanu's head snapped up, his body tensing. The peaceful atmosphere from moments ago shattered, replaced by a sudden sense of urgency and concern. He set his phone and juice aside, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. The sound had been unmistakable, an animal in pain. And given his earlier encounter, he had a sinking feeling about its source. Moving with purpose, Keanu first made his way to the backyard near the pool. trying to pinpoint the sound's origin. The expansive yard, with its meticulously maintained landscaping and inviting pool area, seemed at odds with the distressing noises that had disturbed the morning peace. Keanu scanned the area, his eyes darting for any sign of movement or distress in the neighboring properties. Finding the angle insufficient, he quickly headed back inside and up the stairs to his balcony. From here, he had a clear view into Graham's property next door. What he saw made his heart sink. Graham was entering his house from the backyard, his posture tense and movements agitated. The dog's cries continued, now seeming to come from behind a dense row of ornamental bushes. Keanu realized with growing anger that the bushes were deliberately placed to block the view from the street, creating a hidden area where anything could happen, unseen by neighbors or passers-by. As the cries persisted, Keanu's mind raced. The contrast between Graham's public persona and the reality he was witnessing was stark and disturbing. The man who preached mindfulness and compassion seemed to be hiding a dark secret, one that involved the mistreatment of a helpless animal. Keanu knew he couldn't just ignore what was happening. Something had to be done. But he also understood the delicacy of the situation. Graham was clearly a man of influence in the neighborhood, and rushing in without a plan could make things worse for Rusty. As Keanu stood on the balcony, the warm California sun now feeling oppressive rather than welcoming, he began to formulate a plan. He couldn't stand by and let this continue, but he needed to approach it carefully. Taking a deep breath, he turned away from the disturbing scene and headed back inside to gather his thoughts and decide his next move. The peaceful retreat he had envisioned when coming to Silverwood Estate had suddenly become something far more complex. He realized his time here would involve more than just relaxation and script preparation. He was now faced with a moral dilemma, one that would require all of his compassion, intelligence, and determination to navigate. Keanu paced the length of his living room, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just witnessed. The cries of the dog, Rusty, he reminded himself, echoed in his memory, a haunting reminder of the cruelty that existed just beyond his property line. He knew he had to act, but he also understood the need for caution. Accusations of animal abuse, especially against someone as influential as Graham appeared to be, could have serious repercussions if not handled carefully. With a sense of purpose, Keanu pulled out his phone and quickly typed a detailed message to Patrick. His fingers flew over the keypad, the message a mix of professional detachment and underlying concern. "Patrick, I need your help. There's a situation here that requires delicate handling. I suspect potential animal abuse by a neighbor, a man named Graham Whitlock. He's apparently a well-known author and speaker. I need to investigate further, but I'll need to reschedule today's appointments. Can you handle that for me? Also, see if you can dig up any information on Whitlock or any past complaints about animal welfare in this neighborhood. Thanks." After sending the message, Keanu immediately dialed the number of the movie director he was supposed to meet for an online Zoom meeting at 11. As the phone rang, he paced the room, his free hand running through his hair in agitation. "Hello, this is Keanu," he said when the call connected, his voice calm despite the turmoil he felt. "I'm calling about our Zoom meeting scheduled for 11. Something urgent has come up and I was hoping we could postpone." He listened for a moment as the director expressed concern, then continued, "I understand this is short notice and I apologize for any inconvenience. It's a sensitive situation involving potential animal abuse in my neighborhood. I can't in good conscience ignore it." As he spoke, Keanu was careful not to make specific accusations, aware of the legal implications. He thanked the director for understanding and promised to be in touch soon to reschedule. With his immediate commitments handled, Keanu knew his next step was to gather more information. He made his way downstairs, scanning the living room for Malvin, the butler. He found him adjusting the window blinds, his movements precise and efficient. "Malvin," Keanu began, keeping his voice low and conversational, "I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about the neighbors, particularly Mr. Whitlock next door. Have you noticed anything unusual?" Malvin's hands stilled on the blinds and he turned to face Keanu. There was a flicker of something, concern, perhaps even fear, in his eyes before his professional mask slipped back into place. Mr. Whitlock, sir? He repeated, his tone carefully neutral. Well, there have been some issues. Keanu raised an eyebrow, encouraging him to continue. Malvin glanced around as if to ensure they were alone before speaking again, his voice lowered. For nearly a year now, we've been hearing constant whimpering from next door. Malvin's discomfort was evident in the way he fidgeted with his cufflinks. It's prompted numerous complaints from guests, he added. And how are these complaints handled? Keanu pressed gently. Malvin sighed, his professional demeanor cracking slightly to reveal genuine concern. Each time Mr. Whitlock gave the same response. He claimed it was a problematic rescue breed from a shelter, the result of illegal breeding. The explanation is documented in our rental records. Keanu's frown deepened as he processed this information. It aligned too well with the rehearsed story Graham had given him earlier. And the neighbors? How do they react to this? Keanu asked. Malvin's expression turned grim. Mr. Whitlock. He's something of a self-appointed neighborhood leader. His wealth and connections make others reluctant to challenge him. Most prefer to look the other way, I'm afraid. What about you, Malvin? Keanu asked, his voice soft but intense. Do you think Graham takes proper care of that dog? Malvin shook his head slowly. His professional demeanor cracked further, revealing genuine distress. All the staff knows that man is rude, even toward his own employees. His behavior, it's at odds with the image he projects publicly. The way he speaks to his household staff. The way he treats that poor animal. It's not right, sir. Keanu nodded, processing this information. It confirmed his worst suspicions and strengthened his resolve. Thank you, Malvin. This has been very helpful. I need to get ready now. I'll be attending the event next door. Very good, sir, Malvin replied, his composure regained. All your clothes have been ironed and placed in your wardrobe. Is there anything else you need? Keanu shook his head, already formulating his next move. No, thank you, Malvin. That will be all for now. As he climbed the stairs to his room, Keanu's mind was working overtime. He carefully selected his attire, casual enough for a neighborhood gathering, but allowing for ease of movement if intervention became necessary. He reviewed the event timing in his head, considering how to best position himself to gather evidence of any mistreatment while maintaining his cover story. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and Keanu was more determined than ever to uncover the truth, and if necessary, save Rusty from his abusive situation. As he adjusted his collar in the mirror, his expression was one of grim determination. Whatever happened at this neighborhood event, he would be ready. The stakes were high, and Keanu knew his actions could have far-reaching consequences. But as he thought of Rusty's frightened eyes and trembling form, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for what was to come, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in his quest to bring justice and safety to a helpless animal. At precisely 11 a.m., Keanu found himself walking toward Graham's mansion. The morning sun had grown stronger, casting long shadows across the immaculate lawns and gleaming driveways of Silverwood estate. As he passed the spot where Rusty had been forced to hold his urination earlier, a wave of sympathy washed over him. He could only imagine the desperation the poor animal must have felt, yanked away midstream and then forced to relieve itself in Keanu's yard. The closer he got to Graham's property, the more elaborate the decorations became. Colorful banners proclaiming 75 years of Silverwood excellence hung from perfectly trimmed trees. Balloons in silver and gold bobbed gently in the breeze, their shiny surfaces reflecting the sunlight. It was a display of wealth and community pride that would have been impressive under normal circumstances, but to Keanu, it now seemed like a thin veneer covering a darker reality. A staff member greeted him at the entrance. A young man in a crisp uniform who looked both excited and nervous to be in the presence of a Hollywood star. "Welcome, Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice slightly breathless. "Mr. Whitlock is expecting you. Please follow me." Keanu nodded, following the young man into the house. The interior of Graham's home was a stark contrast to the warmth of Keanu's villa. Everything was rigidly organized, luxury on display without a hint of comfort or character. The walls were adorned with large abstract paintings that looked expensive but soulless. Crystal vases held perfect arrangements of flowers that seemed too pristine to be real. It felt more like a showroom than a home. Each piece was carefully chosen to impress rather than to be lived with. As they passed through the foyer, Keanu's trained actor's eye took in every detail, filing away information that might prove useful later. He noticed a slight scuff on the otherwise perfect marble floor near a closed door. As Keanu stepped into the living room area, Graham appeared, his face set in a wide smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Keanu, so glad you could make it," he exclaimed, clapping a hand on Keanu's shoulder. The touch was just a bit too firm, a subtle assertion of dominance that Keanu didn't miss. "Come, let me introduce you to everyone." They were in the backyard shortly after, and the space was filled with people, all dressed in casual but clearly expensive attire. Conversations hushed momentarily as heads turned to see who had arrived. A ripple of excitement passed through the crowd as Keanu was recognized. "Everyone," Graham announced, his voice carrying across the yard. "I'm sure you all recognize our newest neighbor, the esteemed Keanu Reeves." A chorus of greetings and excited murmurs filled the air. People began to approach, eager to meet the Hollywood star in their midst. Keanu found himself shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, all while keeping a watchful eye out for any sign of Rusty. "Mr. Reeves, we loved you in John Wick," one person said. "Keanu, how are you enjoying our little neighborhood? Will you be staying long? We'd love to have you at our next book club meeting." The questions and comments came in a steady stream, and Keanu responded with his characteristic politeness and charm. However, his mind was only partially engaged in the conversations. He was acutely aware of Graham hovering nearby, watching his interactions with a calculating gaze. As the initial excitement of his arrival began to die down, Graham steered Keanu toward a group of what appeared to be the neighborhood's most influential residents. "You know," Graham said, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone, "you're known for your humble, simple personality. Perhaps we should do a talk together in the future, or even co-write a book. What do you say?" Keanu managed a polite smile but inwardly grimaced at the thought. "That's very kind of you to suggest, Graham," he replied diplomatically. "But I prefer to keep my personal philosophy personal." Graham's smile tightened, a flash of annoyance crossing his face before it was quickly masked. Of course," he said smoothly. "Just a thought. We're always looking for new perspectives in the self-help world." After a few more minutes of small talk, Keanu excused himself, claiming he needed to use the restroom. As he made his way back into the house, he passed by an area in the side garden that caught his attention. A fenced section of the yard contained elaborate obstacle courses, blocks, bars, and tunnels clearly set up for some kind of dog competition. Keanu's heart sank as he thought of Rusty in his weakened state. The dog wouldn't stand a chance at completing these obstacles. He could already imagine the poor animal being laughed at, mocked, or even punished for failing to perform. The setup seemed designed to humiliate, and Keanu felt a surge of anger at the cruelty of it all. As he continued toward the house, his mind raced. He needed to find Rusty to see for himself the conditions the dog was being kept in, but he also knew he had to be careful. One wrong move could alert Graham and potentially make things worse for the animal he was trying to help. Keanu's eyes scanned for any signs of where Rusty might be kept. The pristine interior gave no hints of a dog's presence. No toys, no beds, not even a stray hair. It was as if Rusty's existence had been completely erased from the public areas of the home. Keanu kept his senses alert for any sound or smell that might lead him to Rusty. The house seemed eerily quiet, the sounds of the party outside muffled by thick walls and heavy doors. Just as he was about to give up, Keanu heard a faint whimper coming from the side garden beyond the obstacle course. It was so soft he almost thought he had imagined it. But then it came again, slightly louder this time. With a deep breath to steady himself, Keanu moved towards the door. He knew he was taking a risk, but the thought of Rusty suffering just out of sight of the cheerful party outside steeled his resolve. The door led to the side garden that connected to the backyard where the event guests gathered. The entire vast garden encircled the house, and there were doors at each side. Keanu realized this area was close to where he had seen the dog from his balcony earlier. He peered around a small corner hidden by dense bushes. and to his shock he found Rusty tied to a pole. The area was concealed, separated by a row of ornamental shrubs that provided both visual and auditory cover. The sight that greeted Keanu made his blood run cold. Rusty looked even weaker and more malnourished than before. The dog was salivating excessively, his legs trembling. His eyes, once soulful, now appeared red and unfocused. As Keanu approached cautiously, intending to comfort the animal, Rusty let out a loud cry of distress. Keanu realized with horror that the dog was seriously bruised, particularly in the tender area of his stomach. Graham's voice oozed sarcasm as he spoke. "It should be inside the house, you know." Keanu stood slowly, positioning himself between Graham and Rusty. "What the hell are you doing to your dog, Graham?" he demanded, his voice low but intense. "Why is he so malnourished and beaten up?" Graham repeated his tired excuses. "I told you about the dog. He's a rescue. These things take time." Keanu pointed out Rusty's obvious fear of the garden hose, despite his desperate need for water. Graham's expression darkened. "That dog's been a problem since the day I brought him home. Doesn't appreciate being rescued. It's a useless breed and won't deserve better treatment until it learns obedience. The hose is just a tool to teach him some discipline. You should have seen how aggressive he was when he first arrived." Keanu's mind raced as he processed Graham's cold words. The contrast between the man's image as a self-help guru and the cruelty before him was staggering. Keanu took a deep breath, hoping to dig deeper into the layers of Graham's deception. "If you don't have the commitment to care for a dog, why adopt him in the first place?" he asked, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Rusty cowered behind him, his fear palpable in the quiet corner of the garden. Graham sneered, dropping all pretense. "It wasn't my idea," he said, dismissing the matter with a casual wave as if it were nothing. "My daughter begged for a dog. She wanted some fancy breed like a golden retriever, but I saw an opportunity." Keanu raised an eyebrow, silently urging Graham to continue. The sounds of the party beyond the shrubbery added a surreal backdrop to their tense conversation. "I chose a rescue," Graham explained matter-of-factly. "It fit my image perfectly. I was working on my book, doing interviews, and having a rescue dog with me everywhere made me look like a saint. The media loved it." Keanu's disgust surged. "So Rusty was just a prop for your PR?" he asked, his voice barely containing his fury. Graham shrugged, completely unmoved. "I never liked him. Those sad eyes, that bony frame and unpolished look. It's too much of a hassle to train a dog like that. From day one he was disobedient. A burden." Keanu's voice softened, but it was firm. "Rusty has soulful eyes," he said, turning slightly to face the dog who trembled behind him. "He's lovely. With your resources, you could easily hire a trainer to help with his issues." Graham scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "It's not like he's a human child. He's just a dog." The pieces clicked into place in Keanu's mind. "So that's why Rusty's malnourished," he said, the quiet anger in his voice now clear. "Neglect. Barely any food or water. And I'm guessing the occasional beating when he misbehaved?" Graham's silence confirmed everything Keanu needed to know. The mask of civility shattered completely. "This stops now," Keanu declared, his voice hard as stone. "I'm not letting Rusty go through that ridiculous obstacle course of yours. It's inhumane." To his surprise, Graham laughed. It was a bitter, humorless sound that filled the secluded garden. "You're taking this too seriously," he sneered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's just for fun, no big deal. The kids and neighbors love it. Who cares if the dog wins or not?" Keanu's anger flared. "If you go through with it, I'll expose you to everyone. All the neighbors will know the truth about what you've been doing to Rusty." Graham's mocking laughter only grew louder. "Go ahead," he said, spreading his arms. "They all know and stay silent because of my influence. They love me." His tone turned cruel as he added, "A dog's just a dog, Keanu. Not as precious as human life. They're lowly creatures." Keanu's mind churned with disgust, realizing just how deep the rot went. How many of the smiling neighbors had ignored Rusty's suffering just to stay on Graham's good side? How many had chosen status over doing what was right? Graham's triumph was hollow and Keanu felt a renewed fire in his chest. "See?" Graham said, noting the brief doubt in Keanu's eyes. "What did I tell you? In this world, influence and image are everything. And I've got both." Keanu stood tall, unwavering. "You're wrong," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "I'll expose you for who you are. And I'm going to make sure you face justice for what you've done to Rusty. Your days of hiding behind your reputation are numbered." Graham's laughter rang out once more, echoing in the thick air of the garden. "Try your best," he taunted. "You may be a celebrity, but you're not the only rich person here. Keep protecting that image of yours, Keanu. You never know what kind of stories might start circulating." Keanu's reply was calm but firm. "I'm protecting my reputation by staying true to myself. You should try doing the same. Or people will start seeing through your facade sooner than you think." He bent down to untangle Rusty's metal chain and replaced it with a rope leash, knowing he had to act fast. With Rusty following at his side, Keanu walked past Graham and into the yard, feeling the weight of the guests' stares. Whispers followed them, their eyes tracking every movement. It was a judgment, quiet but unmistakable. Keanu knew that leaving with Rusty was a silent rebuke of the whole community, a community that had failed to see the truth. As they reached the gate, Keanu's steps quickened, determined to get Rusty to safety. Every step with the dog by his side felt like the first move in a much larger battle. The people who'd been part of the world he'd entered in Silverwood were complicit in a lie. A perfect image of kindness when in fact cruelty was hiding just beneath the surface. Back at his villa, Keanu's thoughts raced. Rusty needed immediate care, but there was more to be done. Keanu was committed to giving this dog everything he deserved. He took Rusty inside, where the cool interior contrasted sharply with the confrontation outside. The butler, Malvin, and the staff quickly adapted to the situation, offering their help without hesitation. "I need you to fill a bath with warm water," Keanu said, his voice controlled but urgent. "Not too hot, just enough to clean him up. And then take the chauffeur to the pet store for dog shampoo, grooming supplies, and high-quality food. It's critical." Malvin nodded, ready to act. "Of course, Mr. Reeves. Anything else?" Keanu thought for a moment. "Get a soft dog bed and some gentle toys, nothing too stimulating. Just something comforting." Malvin didn't question the request and hurried off. With Rusty settled in the house, Keanu reached out to Martin, a friend who ran an animal shelter. Keanu explained everything and Martin offered his support. "Bring him in as soon as you can. We'll have a vet ready to help." Keanu felt a sense of relief wash over him. Rusty would finally receive the care he'd been denied for so long. Malvin soon returned, his arms laden with supplies. Keanu could see the relief in the butler's eyes as he carefully set everything down. Keanu smiled slightly. "I'll handle the bath myself. Rusty needs to trust again and I want to be part of that." He led Rusty to the bathroom, the dog hesitant but growing calmer as Keanu moved slowly and spoke gently. With each careful touch, Keanu spoke softly to Rusty, promising him a better future. The process took time, but by the end of the bath, Rusty was cleaner and looked a bit more at ease. Once finished, Keanu led Rusty to his new bed. The dog hesitated before curling up, his exhausted body sinking into the soft cushion. Keanu sat beside him, stroking his head softly. "You did great today, buddy," Keanu whispered. "Tomorrow we'll go to Martin's and we'll get you healthy and strong. You're safe here now and I'll make sure no one hurts you again." The afternoon passed quietly as Keanu stayed by Rusty's side, watching the dog finally relax. Keanu's mission was clear now. Not just to save this animal, but to expose the darkness hiding in Silverwood. This had become his true purpose and he was committed to seeing it through for Rusty and for justice. As Keanu looked at Rusty's peaceful face, he knew this was just the beginning.